Our LCS is Cowabunga Comics out of Oconomowoc, Wisconsin, and their mail order company, Deep Discount Comics. And we went there, and we were actually invoice number 00001. We were the very first their very first customer, which was kind of cool. They've been nothing short of fantastic, customer service wise. Discounts, they were very close, if not the same or better than DCBS on a lot of things. Over and above, customer service wise, always taking care of us, going the extra mile. So responsive, getting instantaneous responses back to questions about things, and to the point where knowing the stuff you like and anticipating your needs and having it suggested that you might want to add this to your order already before you even have to think about it. That's kind of cool. Really quality experience. So we love working with Cowabunga and Deep Discount, and that's why they're in our show notes every single episode, and have been for hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of episodes. That we leave them there because we like them. They're cool, good people. That's why they're in there. By God, they'd tell you to, if you've got a local comic book shop that you love, stay with them, because everybody needs to support their local comic shops. But if you're looking, check them out. You can check them out in the show notes. There's plenty of ways to get a hold of them. Either get on their list, just so you can check and see what kind of FOC and pre-order stuff they have and the discounts, and they'll send it to you each month, get you on that email list. And you can check out their shop, because they have a great shop of exclusive Cowabunga variants. Amazing stuff. Yes, they've always been there for us, and we take them for granted. So there you go. Now you know.
Aloha! It's Jason from Hawaii. Welcome to a special edition of the Comics for Fun and Profit podcast. In this episode, I will be interviewing writers Frank Barbiere and Ricky Mammone. Frank is a friend of the show. The last time I spoke to Frank was back in 2021 with RS Quinones to promote Astonishing Times, and that was in episode 656. Now, Frank and Ricky are here to promote their latest graphic novel, Elixir by Dark Horse Comics. This graphic novel is now available at your LCS when this interview is released. Frank, before I start, Frank, I just want to say thank you very much for the advanced copy. It was great, and we'll talk about a little bit more about that in the interview. Ricky, welcome to the Comics for Fun and Profit podcast. And Frank, welcome back to the podcast. How are you guys doing this evening?
Doing well.
Doing great. Thanks for having us, Jason.
Thank you.
Yeah, very, very excited to talk about this book, as it's very new for us. We have not done much press at all. So.
Oh, okay. Yeah. Like I said, this is a great book. I love it. It's great. Ricky, I have one question for you. It's off the cuff question. I'm sorry. Did I promote your last name correctly?
Yes, you nailed it.
Thank you very much, Ricky. All right. I'm just going to give listeners a brief history of what you've guys, of the works you've guys done in the past. So Frank has worked on the following. He's worked on 5 Ghosts, as I mentioned before, Astonishing Tales. And Frank has also recently wrote a short story for the Lazarus Planet Assault on Krypton that was titled Breakthrough. Now that focused on Lex Luthor's bodyguard and chauffeur, Mercy. Frank, I got to say, I read that short story. I loved it.
Well, thank you. Sammy Bosma, who did the art, was so good too. Whatever you do, like work with DC, sometimes you don't know who's going to end up drawing, but my editor got Sammy on early, and it was super fun. Thanks for checking out. It was a really cool event to be a part of, and not a character who I knew a ton about, but remembered from like the cartoon. Really, I guess that's where she invented the cartoon. She might have been. I should know that, but I don't. But excited to see what DC does with her, and what Josh does in his Superman run with her. So
yes. No, actually, Frank, I'm sorry. I don't mean. Sorry, I'm going. Actually, she was in. Oh God, yeah. No, I think she was introduced in John Byrne's Superman run.
Oh, okay, yeah. So
But anyway, okay, sorry, we're not going to
Mercy Graves sidebar. Ricky, if you could just show yourself out, we're gonna now.
Okay, listeners, Ricky has worked on the following. He's a writer, producer. He wrote for 2 Cartoon Network shows, Mega Man Fully Charged and Power Plays. And he wrote a comic book series called Second Chances for Image Comics. Ricky, is that correct?
Yeah.
Now, listeners, also too, I have to say this, when I did some research, I looked up Ricky's name and I was like, oh my God, Ricky has done these incredible things. Oh my God. But Ricky, can you just briefly mention about your cousin has, you have a cousin who has the same first and last name. Is that correct?
Yes.
So,
Yeah.
And people get you, your friends get you guys confused. Is that correct?
Yeah, a little bit. Yeah. Our dads really screwed us over. They coordinated that. And yeah, so we have the same name. He is also living in Los Angeles and is in the Hollywood entertainment industry, but he produces YouTube shorts and music videos that you know some of them, and they're like really funny parody stuff. But yeah, and now he claims he's impersonating me and pretending to be a comic book writer.
Now, listeners, and I told Ricky this beginning. So I guess so your cousin can go to the LA Comic-Con, buy a table, get a stack of second chances, and just
Yeah.
have it.
Yeah. He's working 2 full-time jobs now. He's doing my job for me.
All right. Frank and Ricky, I'm gonna ask, did I miss anything? Is there any particular work that you guys want to point out before we start the interview or continue on?
I'm all good. Ricky, you got anything or?
No.
All right. So Frank, I'm gonna start with this question with you. For new listeners and for new readers, where can they find you on social media?
So my tag is Atlas Incognita. I wish it was my name, not a hard thing to spell, but that's ATLASINCOGNITA on Twitter. Also, that's my website, atlasincognita.com. That's where I keep everything active. Everything's pretty much on Twitter, but I'll probably move away from that soon. So hopefully my website will get a good update as well.
And what about you, Ricky?
Mine's just at Mammone Ricky, and that's for Twitter. That's pretty much all I use is Twitter. I don't really use much of anything else.
Nice and clean. Way to make it your name. No one will be
Yeah.
confused.
And also simple too. I'm just going to be on Twitter. That's it. I don't need to do Facebook, Hive, or whatever. So.
It's too complicated. I'm not the biggest fan of social media, to be honest.
Yeah. I guess I'm also on Instagram at FJ Bar. Let me actually get back in there if you're not gonna.
No, that's fine. Yeah.
I'm trying to be better in post art on Instagram, but again, I don't draw anything, so I always have to just tag all my collaborators and be like, "Yeah, but I wrote this."
Yeah. All right. So, Ricky, I'm going to start off with you, and Frank, you can jump in. So, how did you guys team up for this book?
Yeah. So Frank and I have been friends for. What has it been, Frank? Like 7 years, 8 years?
Long time. Even Jason saying 2021, I was like, geez, that was 2 years ago. So that's, probably around 8-ish.
Yeah. I think we met in like 2015, maybe. I was working at a talent agency, APA, and I reached out to Frank because I was just a fan of his stuff, and brought him in, and he signed to APA at the time. And it was really cool, and we just became really fast friends. And ever since then, we've been talking about kind of collaborating on doing something because we're just a fan of each other's writing. And so over time, we're kicking around ideas, and we didn't really land on anything until maybe a couple years out. And also Frank's connection to Victor Santos kind of came into play too, and we all started forming this idea together. And I'll let Frank take over from here because he can probably color it a little bit better.
Yeah, no, it was Ricky, if you don't mind me saying, we had met like years before at a con when you were just like walking around like pitching something, I think.
Right. Yeah. I had like a little.
That was the first time we met, but it was just for like a second. But I remembered you because you were
Right.
really nice. When you called me from APA, I was like, oh gosh, I do remember because we had a mutual artist friend. And but so I knew Ricky was a creator as well as bringing me into APA at the time, which was really nice. And we would just spend a lot of time talking about like the stuff I was working on and became friends. I was asking what Ricky was working on because I knew he was trying to write comics as well.
Mhm.
And at the time I was like, well, listen, it was right after Violent Love had wrapped, and I was actually starting to work in video games as well, and very, very burned out on comics. A lot of
Mhm.
like overflow with like the Astonishing Times talk, where I was like, oh, I'm looking for new things to do. I don't know if I can do it full time because I have a new job. So I was looking for co-writers, and I was like, I've read your work like that you've been pitching, and I know you're trying to get out. Why don't we just do a book together? Because I could probably help you get it published. Because sometimes getting the first thing out is so
Right.
hard. And a quick aside to that, it's so funny. Ricky managed to do a book at Image Comics before this book came out, so I wasn't really doing him the favor I thought I was. But we had a great time starting to talk, and I was really looking for something to do with Victor because we had wrapped up Violent Love, and we didn't know what we were going to do. And Victor did a ton of stuff because he's amazing and writes and draws his own work and has a huge career, but is kind enough to want to collaborate with me. And I was like, well, let's do something together. And as Ricky said, we reached out and all just kind of started talking. And it was a slow process because we all didn't really have like a burning idea at first. So it was more of a like, lot of exploratory phone calls and just like, oh, like what should we do between Ricky and I, and then bouncing ideas off Victor through email and seeing what he responded to. But we eventually landed on this, which was really cool, and we really built it from the ground up as just something we wanted to be in a genre that I had not really worked much in, but had a lot of fondness for, which is again fantasy and sci-fi. And just really, as I said, like it grew out of like what we wanted to write, what we liked about those genres, what Victor was interested in illustrating, because I'm always careful with my collaborators to try to figure out like, hey, like what's getting you excited? What do you want to work with? And it came together really naturally from there. Just a long haul because of our kind of like not a lack of interest, but just us waiting to get it right, kind of.
Oh yeah,
Yeah.
I understand that. Yes, and then sorry, I just want to point out to our listeners, when Frank and Ricky are talking about Victor Santos, Victor is the artist on this book. So, Frank, I'm going to say that's a perfect segue. I'm going to start talking. Let's talk about Elixir. Now, I want to read the opening of Elixir. Now, the era of magic has come to an end. Technology flourishes in the modern world, but not all have moved on. The Druids hold on to old magic, hoping to restore the balance and destroy technology. Rumors of an artifact known only as the elixir fuel their holy quest to reinstate magic. Now, Frank, I'm going to start off with you. What is elixir about? And Ricky, please jump in. Please feel free to jump in too. So yes.
So again, Elixir is a urban fantasy sci-fi story that is basically about a young girl who's part of this group known as Druids, who are basically holding on to the last vestiges of magic in a world that's moved on to technology and basically overtaken all of magic with technology. And this girl, our main character Mara, is her mother's a pretty high-ranking Druid and really behind the scenes responsible for a lot of their kind of big moves and important going on. And Mara's old mentor basically has gone rogue, and she doesn't really know what to do with herself. She doesn't know who to believe, and basically ends up on a quest to go find him. And in the process is after the titular elixir, which is an object that is said to be able to reinstate magic. So it's really a coming of age story about our main character and a mirror of that with her old mentor Claude, as they're both trying to figure out what to do with this object and kind of like what they value more, magic or technology. And from Mara's side, it's really a lot about growing up and getting your own idea and not just listening to your elders, as she has kind of these parental figures that represent both sides of these arguments.
Yes.
And that was really what compelled us, I think, to get into the story, to pass it over to you, Ricky. Like we found the genre, we found the setting, but in a lot of our talks, we really gravitated towards like, oh, we want to do a story about growing up, but not the like growing up from like a child to teen, but like from like a teen to adult, where you really start gaining agency and thinking about how the world should really operate and realize that your parents don't really know everything.
Yeah, to piggyback off of what Frank was saying, I think that for whatever reason, when Frank and I were talking about what we wanted to do, we really started, I think thematically, we just were hovering around this idea of this clash between generations
Yes.
and the generational divides and how we view things and the cultures that surround it, and how the youngins are all social media driven and focused, and the older people don't really understand texting and emojis and just, basic shit like that. Sorry if I can't curse on here.
No, you can't. Don't worry.
Okay.
Podcast over. Thank you.
All right, now every other word's gonna be a curse.
That's fine. Richie,
No.
don't worry.
Express yourself, Ricky.
Yeah.
We're all here for you.
So yeah, I mean, we basically we're talking about these generational divides, and I think that really came through in an emotional way for the characters, and that kind of it's not only like an intellectual idea for what we were trying to explore, but it also makes it so that, when the relationships between Mara and her mom and Mara and her mentor, and them trying to understand each other, and as they go on this crazy journey, and her like and trying to just figure out like who can she trust and who is her real parent in this situation. I think that those emotional character moments were really exciting for us to write.
I'm gonna jump ahead a little bit on the questions because that's because that was one of the things I picked up on the story was, the themes about relationships. Like you guys talked about already, Mara's a young generation, Claude and her mom are from an older generation, and it's like the past and the future type deal. The younger generation, the older generation, and also, and please feel free to correct me if I'm wrong, but Victor kind of also showed that through the art as well, because
he's so good at his job. Like we knew like no matter what we wrote, we'd be in good hands with Victor, and he like really delivered beyond expectation. So
because just the opening panel to see Claude, Claude in that train station, I'm going to go, okay, this is pretty cool. And then, there's that fight scene, and then you see one of the trains leave the station, and then there's this this beautiful cityscape. The architectural designs are beautiful, but yet also too, what were you going to say, Frank?
Oh, no, finish your thought, because it's a longer comment.
Oh, no, but then also too, because the console meets, correct me if I'm wrong, they meet underground. And it's kind of like it's this old, it kind of looks like one of these old castle types where it's all stones and torches and so forth. So yeah,
and I just wanted to emphasize too, and again, I feel like I've been talking a lot about the relationship between like writing and art and comics, and I just want to emphasize that like we did not have like months and months. Well, we had some time because this was a book we kind of put together before really taking out, so we took our time, but Victor had to do so much designing on the page and really came up with so much unique, great concepts around what we were writing, and did so much of the world building visually, and just like as an artist and collaborator, he's beyond good at his job. And so many times you'll write stuff in a comic script like, oh yeah, a train comes out of the side of a mountain pass into a giant city, and that's all you'll get, in maybe a little more detail, but really he just like did the work and did so much excellent visual storytelling and world building. We're so lucky to have him, and for me it's like why I always work with him. He just adds so much to the work, and again, I just cannot give artistic collaborators enough credit and praise for the fact that every page they run into something new they have to design and just get it down on the page. They don't spend weeks and months doing kinds of design work, and Victor is again a real champ with that, and I think able to really just elevate every script he works. And I told this to Ricky when we were writing it too, because there was a lot of like, oh no, are we worried about this? But I'm like, Victor will get it. Like, don't worry. And again, Ricky had done comics before, so he knows the collaboration process. But I'm like, no, it's just that's why it's fun. You get to see what we write, and then we get it back from Victor. And we did not. And again, always par for the course. I don't think there was anything we had to correct him on ever. We were just like, nope, made it better. That's good. Like, carry on.
Ricky, do you want to comment on that about Victor's work and when you saw the pages come in? And
Yeah, no, I'm just lucky to be like Frank invited me to do this because he has such a great relationship with Victor. And Victor, they already have like, they trust each other, and I think that that makes things very easy, and we all had like, we're all like friends at this point.
Yeah.
So it's just cool to be in that environment while working, but also like to add to what Frank was saying in praise of Victor, he's also extremely fast and reliable, which honestly is not super common in with artists in general. Like a lot of perfectionists will like end up taking more time, and it's like kind of it can become like a little bit like pulling teeth to get more work out of them. But Victor is the opposite of that and is just such a professional with every single step. And he juggles a lot too while
he's always doing other stuff.
He's so busy.
He's such a savant. I'm like, oh, thank you for taking the time to work with us, Victor. Like, despite having your own thing going.
We're lucky to have him.
Well, and again, Ricky, because again, we won't get a ton into co-writing, but I feel like on Astonishing Times, like a lot of that for me was like showing Eris like how you write and doing a lot more of just like conversations and then me scripting. But here Ricky scripted a ton of this book, like I'd say like a big part, so it was really cool for us to like break the story, like do an outline, and then Ricky, you scripted, and see Victor draw from your script. So I feel like we got like 2 layers of like removal from the work for me of like, oh, it's awesome to see the pages coming in. And again, it's just, I think, speaks to Victor's versatility. And I will say the one thing that at this point is I know kind of how he thinks a little on the page and what he likes to draw. So I always try to work towards that. And I think it gives us sculpts because again, not spoiling anything in the book, but like I am particularly a fan of like very montage style sequences. And towards the end, like we have a lot of double page spreads with paneling on them that Victor just did such beautiful compositions for.
So I'm going to just say, so listeners, if you get a chance, please pick up this book. The story is great, and we'll talk a little bit more. I'll get a little bit more into the story and what I like about it. But the art is amazing.
And yeah, and Victor toned and colored it himself too. He was a one-man show on this one, and really just, I guess he does that a lot. He was on Violent Love as well. He's just did a really, really tremendous style here. He used mostly blue tones with like some spot colors, like some yellows and reds, and then some black and whites for flashbacks. And it's a really just very, very striking book visually.
It is. It really is. Sorry, Frank, I'm going to get back to the questions. When you guys talked about the story and stuff, did you guys have like some type of like a Bible or guidelines and maybe a map what the world would look like?
I laugh because we probably should have, but we did a lot of like, I guess you'd call it pre-production between Ricky and I. Like we took a lot of notes and like really want to make sure that when we were talking about like magic in the world, like that there was like some sense behind it when we were talking about, again, some of like the philosophy and some of the backstory. But I think very quickly we realized like we're not the type of storytellers who want to like bury you in that exposition. Like we just want to jump into the story and let it come across naturally, which again is a little bit of a like leap of faith towards readers. But I will quote one of my friends' fathers and many other smart creative people have always said, like, we want to write to our like smartest audience, not the audience we fear won't understand. So I'm very glad with the reception we've had from the few people who read it. They pick it up because really like we didn't want to have to like spend a bunch like talk about this is exactly how magic works or like this is the exact timeline. We're like, we think it comes through. And if anything, I feel like that first page with that little like Star Wars scroll of like what happened, like I wrote that at the very last minute because we had a page left, and I think it gives enough context, but you could have read the book without it. But again, we really did a lot of this development kind of just like in a Google Doc basically, and then we're like, well, we know this stuff, let's write the book and see what comes across. And but it was fun. It was a fun process to do with another person because again, I'm very much like I get excited and want to jump into the script and not do a lot of that development. So having, and Ricky, you could speak to this as well, but having another person actually like almost like idiot check you a little bit and be like, does this make sense? Does this feel good? Was a cool process.
Yeah, I think like at first we were really excited to do something really expansive and big, and we were like, it's gonna be like a Brandon Sanderson Mistborn like lodge. Well, we're gonna have like a magic system, and
Yeah, hard magic
it's gonna be
system.
like
Yeah.
yeah, it's gonna be like Final Fantasy, and we're gonna have all these cool moves and stuff. And then
Yeah.
we like kind of did some of that work, but then we were like, okay, we're not gonna do any of this in the actual book. And
Yeah.
then so when we went to go write the book, we were just like, all right, we're just gonna show how this works through the
Yes.
action. And that's it. And we're gonna focus entirely on story and the
Mhm.
emotions stuff
And because
rather.
you see, yeah, you see them like druids like summon the weapons. Like we had like all the
Yes.
logic of that. Like where are they coming from? Why does so and
Oh,
so have
yeah.
this? And like it's cool stuff, but like we're just like, listen, we have a limited amount of space. We really spend so much time, and again, this is why I enjoy working with Ricky. And when I got to know him as a friend and a writer, like the stuff he values is really what I value, which is like, oh, those like how the characters drive the story, and again the emotional conflict there. So we were pretty happy to lean on our own instincts and say, you know what, like I like fantasy writing, I like lore and world building, but
Mhm.
that's not the type of writer I necessarily am. And we found, I think, a happy medium. So
Um, because like you said, it's you guys want you guys just jump right into the story. You guys want to show and not tell, because that's the thing that grabbed me into it. Because the first page is, all I see is a train station. I see Claude. I see Mara's mother and her two bodyguards, and and then all of a sudden it's like, it's just a go. It's just and for me, I just got sucked into it. And it just flowed naturally. It was natural. It was, you know, I I went along. I was like, this is great. Um, and and then the other thing was, you didn't have to. You're right. You didn't have to explain. Okay, when Claude starts making his sword, you didn't have to um put a caption. Oh, this is where Claude is getting his source from.
yeah.
It's just no.
Mhm.
This is the world. It's already been explained. This is the world. He's a druid. We know him because he's making a sword out of magic already. And like I said, that was just great. It's just um, and I just loved how it just flowed. It's just. Mhm.
And I think that's also a great example of like Victor kind of like working some of that like lore and world building in, because you can see like in the art the like swords almost look like they're growing like plants, and that was like a big thing that we
Mhm.
pushed earlier. Like, oh, we want them to reflect like kind of the nature magic, and he worked that into the design of the
Yes.
weapons, which is so great. That was one of the designs he did do. I feel like he did design like the weapons. He had
Mhm.
tried a few for Mara. I think she had like little hand axes at first or something,
Mhm.
but again, it's just so great to be able to lean on an artist like that to kind of get that stuff across in the book. And again, we feel very fortunate, obviously, to have him give us his time. So
Um, I'm gonna ask. There's a phrase. Actually, there's a phrase in the book I want to point out. Um, and Ricky, I'm gonna start off with you. So this phrase, "until we decay and become one," is said a few times throughout the story. Ricky, I'm gonna start off with you, and Frank, add anything to that. So where did you guys?
I honestly think Ricky wrote that, so he's a good person
Okay.
to
Yeah, I think it's, we wanted to have some kind of a little bit of a religious connotation with the whole Druid society
Okay.
and religions, they like their little chants and their prayers, and um that's for the Druids, that's their little mantra. And it's because everything revolves around this idea where, we're all one, and we're all united, and we're all just energy. But it's also ironic because Mara's mom does not abide by that philosophy, and it could be a very selfish person, without giving too much away. There's this weird irony to it, that I thought was kind of, you know, funny in a way, but also it's it fleshes out what they are supposed to believe in, and And
Mhm.
and even though they're not necessarily always following that idea.
And that is the fun of having a co-writer, because that's the kind of concept like we talk about, like, oh, they should definitely have something really like evocative and interesting, they say, and me being like, cool, come up with that. And then I think you nailed it, because again, it has like a great sound to it. It really does have that, like, it feels of a religion. It has deeper meaning. So good job, Ricky. That was a really good druid mantra you came up with.
Thanks, Frank.
I'm going to talk about, I'm going to move on. I'm going to talk about, Frank, I want to start off with you. The after the title page, you guys give special thanks to a couple important women in your lives. Now, may I ask if you'd like to expand on that?
Yeah, for sure. And I hope this isn't a bummer.
No.
But again, my mother unfortunately passed a few years back, and we were close, but very different in terms of our political ideologies. And it wasn't really until like kind of the recent, very, I will say, almost like feels like two sides really at each other in like almost like a like two sports teams fighting conflict of modern politics, at least more so than I've seen in my life. Again, I love my mom. She was a great mom, a great woman, but like we did not have the same political ideology. And for me, it turned into realizing a lot of, oh, like when I was young, because again, my mom wasn't like a hardcore conservative, but more than I ever thought. And I just never noticed because I wasn't paying attention to that. And I realized a lot of the things that my parents, who were both immigrants who came from poor families and worked super, super hard to get everything they did, as I grew up in like a middle class suburb in New Jersey, just realizing how much of their worldview that shaped. And that's a lot of what I put into this book. And when I started talking with Ricky, I remember that moment of kind of like realizing like, oh my gosh, like I don't see the world the same as you, like, and I can still love you and respect you. And again, you're not a bad person, but like, wow, this is a huge divide. And that really went a lot into the story as well, of like, oh gosh, like how can you deal with the fact that like what you thought was right from your parents isn't, not that it's evil, but it's not how you see that's not what you want to do. So again, it very fittingly credit my mom with this, because it is an optimistic story at the end. It's not about necessarily conflict with the ones you love. There is a lot of reconciliation in it. And again, that's where that came from. So it was a very easy thing to dedicate.
Yeah, and in terms, just to I lost my grandma around the same time, and that we were writing this book. So it was also a lot of it. I think naturally what ended up happening is that Frank and I put a lot of things about loss and grief into the story without really planning to do that. So it's not it's there's a lot of there's a lot more going on in terms. I don't want to ruin anything, but there's a lot about loss and how these characters cope with that idea or have guilt surrounding that idea.
Frank and Ricky, just thank you very much for sharing that. And the reason I asked that question, because after I read the book, I went back to the credits page just to make sure I got, Victor's name right, the artist Victor, and the editors and so forth. And I saw that little, the little blurb, it's very small. It's like the special thanks. And when I saw, Ricky, who you're thanking, and Frank, who you were thanking, and again with this story, how the relationship, and I just thought that it was just it was nice that you guys, it was a nice special thanks, Ricky for your grandmother, Frank for your mom, because it's a relationship between a daughter and a mother. It's like that. Yes, that's so. I just thought it was.
Thank you for reading the credits page. So you're a good man at making sure that everyone's there. And I feel like that's a good segue to shout out all the people who worked on this book with us as well. And first and foremost, we had Sasha E. Head, who is a brilliant designer and managed to find some time to make the main logo for us. We had wanted to do a ton of design work on the book, but we ended up we wanted to do this was when we were still in we're going to do a intense lore heavy, hard magic system. We want to make magic explainer pages. We did not get to that, but we still absolutely loved the logo that Sasha did. She's such a great designer. And again, crushing it in her field. So we were glad to get her into the book in that capacity. And then our editorial team at Dark Horse, who was Dan Chabon, who brought in the book, has been wonderful. And our assistant editors, Chuck and Misha, who were, again, wonderful in the process of getting this all together and all the insane stuff that happens when you're working on a comic book, and very patient with us. And then Lin Wang, the designer, and Tyler Lee, the digital art technician. And again, they put together a beautiful set of kind of like interior pages and the back page of the book. And again, the team at Dark Horse does work. So we're really happy to have them on.
Frank, I'm going to ask you, and Ricky, please just chime in. How did you guys team up with Dark Horse? I mean, I know Astonishing Times was published through Dark Horse, but
yeah, it's funny. Cause we literally like a week or two ago on March 20th, that was the 10-year anniversary of Five Ghosts coming out at Image Comics, which I feel like I always kind of remember as being like a big moment for me. But my very first like published work was at Dark Horse and Dark Horse Presents, and then with shortly after with a book called The White Suits, and an editor named Chris Warner, who is still there, who's awesome. He's a great artist as well. He drew a lot of the Predator comics back in the day, and is just a super nice guy as well. He was one of the first editors to ever just answer a cold email from me and got my book into Dark Horse Presents when it was relaunching. And again, I owe so much to them for helping my career. So I've always stayed in touch because, again, I'm someone who has worked like all over the place, and there's not a comic company I won't try to work for, basically. But I'm really glad to always be able to bring books to Dark Horse every now and then, and work with them, as they're great people and really just put out nice collections. And their books are distributed so well. They're always in bookstores. Like I will always see my Dark Horse because I did The White Suits there with Toby Cypress, which is, again, Toby is incredible. I was so floored to get him so early in my career. I did a character called Blackout with Chris Warner, and that was, we had some shorts and then also did a series. Those I did might have just been those two. I did something else. But long story short, I've been back and forth with them a lot, and again, they were a good fit for this project. They work a lot with Victor as well. They had done his Polar books, and he does a few things. So it was very much, and as you said, and we had just done Astonishing Times, and Dan is our Dan Chabon's our editor on that. So I was like, hey Dan, by the way, we also have this book with Victor. He was like, yeah, no duh, we'll do it here if you want it. We're like, of course. I will say we did initially think when we were putting this book together that we might do it as a limited series, but I'm actually very happy with how it came out as just a graphic novel, as I think it's a nice like self-contained read to sit down and read.
Ricky, do you want to add anything to what Frank has said?
Well, Frank did all of that magical stuff and got the publisher. I didn't do anything, so I just got to sit
you helped
back.
make the book, so that was the hard part. But again, I was happy to have that pre-existing relationship with Dark Horse. Again, they liked what we did, so really, yet again, we owe it all to you.
Frank and Ricky, I have to. Yes, I'm glad that this story is in a graphic novel format, because again,
I was going to ask, because you read it just sitting down in one piece, and I'm curious how it felt as just one book. Yeah.
The thing, I don't know, for me, it worked well, because the flow of the story, the momentum, it just worked, and it's just one, and it's just one story, in this graphic novel, which is, I thought it was great. And like I said, it just worked well. That's what I loved about it. And Frank, don't take this the wrong way, because I think there's some limited series that will work, whether as monthly and then you collect it in a trade. But I'm going to say, but this one, this was the right format that you guys found.
No, glad to hear it, because that's how we ended up doing it. Because even when we were doing it as single issues, the first issue was 42 pages. So we're like, this is a long, but like, there's a lot of ground we want to cover. We should maybe think about this. I think that was pretty indicative of where we ended up.
Yeah. I'm just repeating myself, but like I said, again, for this story, the format worked. It was great.
Yeah, it would be nice if there were more opportunities to do graphic novels, but I feel like so many times, economically speaking, it's much more profitable to do single issue releases, and that's why you see a lot of those.
Yes.
But in this particular scenario, it was actually the opposite, and Dark Horse preferred us to do a graphic novel, which was really cool. And I think we were both kind of excited to do an actual, just, you know, standalone OGN for once.
Yeah, the funny part for me is it was just so much book to sit on. Like the fact we had 130 pages before, and that no one ever read feels so weird because I'm used to like building that out in small pieces. But soon, very, very soon, and probably by the time everyone's listening to this, it'll be out. So it just is one of those things where all comics end up like this for me, where like they feel like our own weird little project that no one's seen.
Yes.
And then when they finally come out, it's like, oh yeah, that's right. The world gets to see that.
And Ricky, I'm glad, like you said, I'm glad Dark Horse made the decision, let's do graphic novel. I'm really glad that they did that.
Yeah. It's definitely not a common occurrence, I would say.
Yes. I want to talk about a little bit about, Frank, I know you worked with Vic. We've talked about Victor a lot. For our listeners, you know, and correct me if I'm wrong, but I love Victor's style. It's sort of that, he's got that Frank Miller, Michael Avon Oeming art style vibe. Is that correct?
Yeah. What's funny because like I'm not an artist, but I work a lot with artistic collaborators, and I always find like when I talk about their style, there's so many layers beneath whatever I say because I say the very obvious stuff. So Victor, forgive me if I reduce your art in any way, but it's only meant as complimentary stuff. But I had first seen it when because he worked with Mike Avon on Mice Templar a little bit. I think he did some issues and Mike did some issues, and I know they're friends, as he's told me since that. Again, I think he has a new book with Mike coming out at Dark Horse soon called is it The Matriarch, I think, or something like that? My gosh.
Yeah, it's something like that. It's sorry.
The Monarch, forgive me, excuse me.
The Monarch, yeah.
The Monarch, yeah. So he's got a book coming out with Mike Avon that looks awesome as well. But I remember seeing it for the first time, and definitely like almost like a lot of Bruce Timm influence, a little bit of like Darwin Cook, and I'm trying to think of who he just said in that interview, because he has like kind of deeper influences than that. But that's what always jumped out to me. And obviously a very big like Frank Miller influence as well, with his use of like kind of spot blacks, and I think some of the ways he does figures like big, especially with us. He had said in another interview, like when we first brought the idea of like Claude and Mara to him, he loved the idea of like the difference of their silhouettes. Of Mara as like a younger like woman who's like very like slim, and then Claude is this big hulking brute, and immediately he drew them like kind of back to back. And like, no, that looks awesome. I think like the cover was one of the first pieces that he ever put in front of us, and we're just like, yeah, you got it, man, that's perfect. Like so he just again he's very much an artist as well, and just good at everything. Like again, I can't praise Victor enough, but I think his style is so underappreciated, the level of composition and all the different influences together, because he also really likes manga, and I feel like that shows in his paneling and the way he can do action so well, and kind of do creative movement on the page. Because the first time I worked with him was at Boom Studios on a book called Black Market, and I just have to thank my editors Eric Harburn and Chris Roses for that, because they're the ones who reached out to him and got him on the book. And I loved his work, but never even thought to like put him on a book. I was like, oh my gosh. And from there I've held on as tightly as I can. But yeah, his work is very unique and speaks for itself, and I'm so glad any chance we get to let people see more.
Ricky, I'm going to start off with this question. Actually, it's kind of a sort of a fun question, because now when Mara and Laura Lee are at Rachel's grave, there's a gang of techies that corner them. Whose idea was it to have a mutant-like character? And the mutant, I'm talking from Miller's Dark Knight Returns, in this scene.
I think that was just all Victor, to be honest. Do you remember it?
I think we had said it, like, because I was thinking.
Did we
Victor,
say it?
And I was said, Victor, you can make the techies look like Dark Knight Returns guys if you want. He's like, I love this idea, and sent us back a sketch of them like that. And I'm like, no, that's a fun way to homage Frank Miller, and also I think play into Victor's interest. So I think it was kind of a little bit of me like giving a wink to him and him running with it.
Yeah, and I think it was like
I think you had the idea, Ricky, of them just being like teched out teens, and then hack Frank Barbiere was like, wait, we can make them look like Frank Miller characters.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, and I think that it's definitely just like a natural thing for Victor to go in that direction, and kudos to Frank for doing that homage. It was a good idea.
Mm-hmm. So, Ricky, I'm going to ask you. So, when you saw that page of that graveyard scene, when you see the techies, what was your reaction when you saw, the techies, and you go, "Oh my God, there's that mutant leader,"
Did you
or
you
the mutant?
recognize
Actually, one of the mutants.
I guess you probably read the email, right, Ricky? So it wasn't a total surprise.
Yeah, it definitely wasn't a total surprise. I it's really cool to play around with characters that are like direct. It looks like it's from the pages of Frank Miller in a way. Not like what Frank said, not to reduce Victor's work, because I think it is extremely unique. And I also wanted to add, just before we move forward with this one, in terms of Victor's like manga influence, he also did reference other like anime stuff. Like Satoshi Kon is a big influence. He was a great anime director.
Mm-hmm.
And I think that also was like, that made this book so exciting to do, because it's like Frank and I are also huge anime nerds and manga lovers. So I think we got to inject a lot of those influences as well into like what the techies look like and how they fight, and like these insane kinetic action sequences, that like the techies fighting Mara and Lauralee in that graveyard scene is a good example. And just like playing around with the motion that Victor is so damn good at.
Mm-hmm. All right, guys, I'm going to slowly wrap things up. Now, if you can, are there any future projects that you guys are going to be working on that we can look forward in the future? Or
I'm trying to think of. I will say, not talking schedule, we have a volume 2 of Astonishing Times that's going to be coming soon. I'm really excited for that.
Mm-hmm.
I have 2 long-standing like creator-owned projects I've been slowly putting together. I'm not ready to announce what they are, where they're going to be, but very, very soon, I hope in 2023, we'll at least start talking about them. And yeah, that's all I got for now. I was about to say this book, because we've been waiting to put this book out in so long, but I'm sure I'll rope Victor into another problem. Another book soon. Yeah, I meant to say there's a slip of the mind. Another problem for him.
Yeah, same
Ricky,
thing.
what do you got going on?
Comics equals problems. That's the big takeaway. I have a few things that it's still pretty early. I have a book at Aftershock that is in limbo because they went bankrupt, so that's always fun. Hopefully that won't be the case for that much longer, but
was that ever announced, Ricky, or is that just
no? It wasn't announced, but we do have a finished issue of it, so it would be nice to get that actually moving forward. I have another Image book that's very early stages, and it's actually at Chris Ryle's imprint, which is cool. But that one is not officially announced yet, and so we're not really talking about it. Even though my artist is already posting shit about it, as one does. And yeah, I think everything else is kind of like too early to talk about for me, I would say, but I got stuff in the works.
Okay. Well, thank you. All right. The last question about the Elixir. What was the cool thing or things that you guys love working on this book?
Ricky, I'll let you go first. So before I give my long ass answer about loving comics.
My really to the point answer would be that, first of all, I think comics is all about collaboration. I think I'm probably stealing what Frank is about to say, but I just love being able to collaborate with Frank and Victor and make some really cool shit, build a whole world from scratch, tell a unique story, and it was just like this was a really fun book to write. And I felt like we didn't have there was no like outside pressure. We got to do exactly the book that we wanted, the way we wanted to, and that freedom and is just it's really fun and fulfilling. You can go now, Frank.
Yeah. Second paragraph. Again, no, just I love making comics, and again, I think I mentioned it a lot in our Astonishing Times talk. I work in video games as my full-time job during the day, but I will never stop doing comics because, like Ricky said, I love the collaboration. Again, I've really grown to love co-writing stuff, as a lot of the fun of that is just talking through your ideas with another person, and very much almost like writer's room type approaches where you're breaking the story together to the point where it doesn't matter who scripts the page. You're coming up with the ideas together, because especially in a comic, and a collaborator like Victor's going to come forward and just elevate it. And again, nothing is better to me than the surprise of seeing comic pages come in when you've turned a script to an art. So that will keep me in it for a long time, and it's always fun.
Oh, that's so cool. All right, Ricky.
I will say on the last note too, I did letter this book as well. I lettered a bunch of my work. I hate doing it because it's a ton of work, and I'm not a great letterer despite having done it, as I've worked with a lot of amazing letterers who are much better than me. But I do weirdly enjoy it at the end of the process. Like while doing the work, I'm just like, why did I agree to do this? But it's really nice to get my hands almost on the art and be part of that, and really just look at all our dialogue as we're going through and be like, yeah, this fits. And every time I end up cutting some out as we go, because especially with Victor, because he ends up doing so much on the page. But it was surprisingly cathartic to do it again after having not done it for a while. Gosh, probably since Violent Love. I think that was the last thing I lettered. So back at it again.
Yeah,
I normally don't credit myself, by the way, too, but Dark Horse credited me as lettering the book. So I'm like, oh, well, I'll take it.
Yeah. I mean,
I mean, Frank lettering the book saved us a ton of money that we really needed to save. So special shout out to Frank Barbiere for
bringing my secret talent out, resubscribing to Adobe products to get this book lettered.
all right, so fun question. Actually, Ricky, I'm going to ask you this question because I already asked Frank about this question the last time I interviewed him. Have you and your family been to Hawaii?
I have been there a couple of years ago to Kauai for a short while. But it wasn't long enough. I want to go back. It was amazing though. We loved it so much. It was amazing. We surfed, we did we were in nature a lot of the times, and it was just the best experience. It was amazing.
Because Ricky, usually the outer islands like Kauai, Maui, the Big Island, you won't see like urban cities. Like if you come to Oahu, you're gonna see buildings left and right where I mean it's still beautiful, but it's left and right. Whereas you go Kauai or Maui, you can drive along and you just be seeing mountains.
Yes.
Green. So it's when that's why whenever people ask me, it's like it's best to just go to the outer island. Yeah.
One day, Jason, where are you from? I'll get there.
Well, I am Frank. You say one day you'll get here. One day.
One day I'll get to Hawaii and I'll consult with you. But let me ask you.
That's fine. That's fine. I'm hoping. Hopefully, let's put it this way. Hopefully, if there's any convention organizers listening to this, Frank and Ricky are available to come down. Yeah.
I think everyone will be.
Ricky, I live on Oahu, the main island.
Oh, okay. Very cool.
Thank you. All right, Frank, I'm going to start off this question. I got a couple more questions. So, Frank, I'm going to start off with you. In either late April or May, do you guys have any book signings you guys have set up or convention appearances?
Not yet. I mean, I'm hoping to get to New York Comic Con this year to be tabling. I was supposed to go last year, but had to cancel at the last minute due to just a bunch of personal drama. But hopefully we'll be back there in October-ish. as that is unabashedly my favorite show. And hopefully we'll be doing some signings for Astonishing Times finally, and maybe something for Elixir. We'll figure it out. I keep forgetting because honestly I've been in pretty hard lockdown for the last few years, but looking forward to getting out there and actually doing some events this year.
Ricky, I'm going to ask you, I'm going to make this a funny, I have to preface this. I'm just joking, Ricky. So will you be going to New York Comic Con with Frank, or is it going to be your cousin?
Yeah, it'll be my cousin.
Whoever comes, I'll treat them with respect. It'll be good.
I didn't tell Frank this, but he actually wrote the whole book. Special shout out to cousin Ricky.
The Ricky Mammone Alpha. Yeah.
Yeah, thanks for having us, Jason. This was a lot of fun.
Of course, yeah. So happy to be back, Jason. Thank you for not being too sick of me the first time.
Last question. This last question I'm going to direct it to you, Frank, and then I'll have Ricky answer. Any closing words to our listeners?
Thank you for your interest in comics. Thank you for interest in listening to creators speak, and I hope you guys enjoy Elixir. It's been a real passion project, and as I think you've heard me and Ricky say, we really put a lot of care. And even if you hate everything we came up with, I think it's worth it alone for Victor's incredible art. So you'll find something to like. Definitely.
And especially for fans of Frank and Victor's other stuff. And I know there's many who love Violent Love. And I think that it'll be coming home again for that creative team. I'm just here as a side person.
We're just trying to actually dip into the Ricky Mammone fan base. That's what we want to play all along. So
all 5 people. My mom. But,
all right, so Frank and Ricky, I wish you guys all the success with Elixir, and mahalo. Just thank you guys. Thank you very much for your time. Frank, thank you for giving me another opportunity to interview you.
Anytime.
Thank
please.
you very much.
Thanks, Jason.
No problem. And to listeners, if you are a lifelong comic book reader or a new comic book reader, please check out Elixir from Dark Horse Comics. It's in when this interview is released, it's going to be out in stores right now. If your LCS does not have a copy for their store, ask them to order one, please. As you heard me throughout the interview, I love this story. It just, to me, I just got pulled into the first page. It just flowed very smoothly. I love the characters of Mara. I love Claude. He was perfect. And the amazing art by Victor Santos. Victor's art pulled me into this world. It's amazing. His artwork is amazing. The characters of Mara and Claude are very, to me, I loved it. I like these characters. I want to thank Drew, the host of Comics for Fun and Profit, for putting this episode together. Drew, thank you very much for all your hard work behind the scenes. And if you are a new listener, please check out new episodes of Comics for Fun and Profit that comes out every Saturday. And I want to thank you, the listeners. Thank you very much for your time. Thank you for listening to this episode. Until next time, guys, aloha.
Thank you, everyone.
The good folks at Comics for Fun and Profit have been doing 2 episodes a week for quite some time now, and it's all thanks to, first of all, Jason, and second of all, our patrons, who allow us to add the space on our server, broadcast more, store more, share more with you, the listeners. I'm envious of those of you who have unlimited storage and media server capabilities. We pay for ours here at the C4FAP. It ain't cheap. We thank you so much for those of you who go to patreon.com/comicsfunprofit and contribute at any level to say thanks, to say, I want to be a part of your Slack channel conversations. I want to get exclusives. I want to get early access. I want to get ad-free access. I want to get swag. I want to get some free stuff. Whatever your reasoning is, we appreciate it at any level because it does make a difference. So from the bottom of Kyle and I and Jason's heart, thank you for contributing.